14.1, our third lecture in a series on refuting atheism, looking at atheism from the biblical perspective. And our text, once again, is Psalm 14, verse 1. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good. Now, as we finished our last consideration, we were talking about the importance of, in refuting atheism, that really the proper way to do it is we take the Christian world and life view and we put that up against the atheist world and life view, and we see that the Christian world life view accounts for reality, it accounts for meaning, it accounts for ethics, it accounts for logic, it accounts for all these things, and it is the only rational position. However, the atheistic position does not account for logic, it does not account for ethics, it does not account for meaning. It is nihilism, it is absurd. And then we were finishing with a quote of Van Til. Let me finish this quote, and then we're going to look at some of the chief arguments for atheism and show the absurdity of them. We're going to look at the Big Bang Theory, and we're going to look at macroevolution just briefly, and how atheists use these things. They think they're bulwarks against Christianity, and it's the exact opposite. Continue with Van Til. What they are depends not upon ultimate determinative character of God, but upon the ultimate determinative character of man, who virtually takes the place of God. Every fact, then, that has scientific standing is such only if it does not reveal God, but does reveal man as ultimate. No other facts are allowed as main facts unless they are raw material generalizing to a system that keeps God out. They are statistically standardized correlations of existential changes. Existential changes as such are irrational, but they are standardized by the original non-derivative organized action of man as autonomous. Only then are they facts with scientific standing. It is thus that in the very act of the observation of facts the non-Christian does, so far as he works according to his principle, do what Kuyper calls the natural man always does, namely, suppress the truth of God into naturalistic categories. Brilliant statement. Brilliant statement. What Van Til is saying is that the atheistic worldview not only leaves man without any meaning or ethics, but also leaves man with a self-contradictory epistemology or theory of knowledge. In order to flee from God and the doctrines of creation and providence, the atheist must posit a purely chance universe. Things are random. Reality is non-structured. But when the atheist wants to form arguments based on reason or conduct science, he must insist, in fact, that reality is highly structured. He must walk a self-contradiction as he conducts science or reasoning. But these two ideas, of course, are explicitly contradictory. They cancel each other out. Once again, we point out that the atheist must presuppose a theistic concept of the universe when he criticizes Christians. Atheists are also inconsistent in that they argue that knowledge and the knowable is limited to what can only be experienced by the finite mind. Only what finite human minds can discover in an autonomous process can be labeled as truth. But as they make this claim, they repeatedly make universal statements about reality or spheres that they have not yet personally experienced. So they want to limit everything to the autonomous mind of man, and with finite human reason confined, and on the other hand, they make all sorts of universalistic statements about which they have no knowledge or cannot know. This brings us to the supposed greatest weapon of the atheist, which is modern science. The atheist claims that modern science has disproven the Bible, has disproven Christianity. It has disproven creation, and thus they say we can discard the Bible as a myth. They consider modern science to be devastating to the Christian position. To disprove such thinking, we will do two things. Now first, as in the case of logic and ethics, we must point out that atheism logically destroys science. While the Christian worldview, where the universe is created and controlled by God, is what makes science possible, if there's no transcendent God, above and beyond the created universe, and if everything is nothing more than matter plus time plus chance, then we ask, could not the universe just explode or implode or dissipate or turn inside out tomorrow? In other words, they're assuming the uniformity of nature, they're assuming universal laws that control nature, which comes distinctly from the Christian worldview. If it arose by chance, then why not? The fact that God created the universe to be orderly and structured, and the fact that God comprehensively controls all aspects of created reality, are what makes science possible. They are why modern science arose in the Christian West and not the pagan East. The atheistic scientists must presuppose the Christian view of reality in order to conduct experiments and make logical inferences. In a chance universe, there is no reason why universal laws, such as the second law of thermodynamics, should be universal. There is no reason or guarantee that tomorrow or next week or next year, all the various scientific laws will not somehow change and mutate. They have no basis on which to make such statements. Just because something has functioned a certain way in the past is no guarantee of its functioning the same way in the future. Because the future is not the past. Now, if you believe in God and you believe in revelation, that's no problem. But if you believe in a chance universe, that is a big problem. Scientific laws are dependent upon the God of the Bible, who absolutely controls every aspect of created reality. The irony is that the secular humanist must presuppose the Christian philosophy of life in order to criticize the Christian philosophy of life. The secular humanistic worldview, if consistent, would declare that knowledge and meaning are unattainable. In such a system, it is as though man, once again, is made out of water, in an ocean of water, climbing a stairway of water into a sky of water. With no fixed reference point for meaning and knowledge, the secular humanist is left in the void of nihilism. So what we talked about ethics, what we talked about logic, what we talked about meaning and so forth applies to science as well. And then second, we would do well to look at how modern theoretical science is more akin to religion, a religion or a philosophy, than true science. Now, when we think of science, we generally think of men who observe and measure things. Experiments are repeated over and over again to determine if the findings are reliable and universal. What we traditionally think of science is men examining the surface areas of life. How heavy is iron? How does gravity affect this or that? What happens to the eyes of a rat if it is left in total darkness for 2 months? How long can the human body be cold before it goes into shock? These are things that can be observed. They can be observed by a variety of men. They can be conducted over and over. And then you come at some sort of findings. It has to be repeatable. It has to be observable. It has to be repeatable. It has to be something that can be done again and again. If something can be repeated over and over, and if scientists conduct experiments and come to identical conclusions on both sides of the globe, then we have what's called a reliable discovery. This kind of science is not a threat whatsoever to Christian theism. The problem that we have had for a long time with modern scientists and science is that they have gone far beyond looking at surface observations of various things and have assumed the role of philosophers and religious mystics. They really have. They do this by trying to figure out all of the big questions. And these big questions are clearly beyond the realm of scientific discovery. They simply are. They take tiny bits of information about the universe and they go way beyond their simple observations and develop theories out of their imaginations that are large and all-embracing and that can never be proved. And this is where modern sciences run headlong against Christianity. Because they become religious mystics. They act like religious priests. They act like shamans. They act like they can determine the large questions of reality when they indeed cannot. Well, let's look, for example, at the Big Bang Theory, which is universally accepted as truth today. Let us briefly look at the discoveries that led to the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory developed from two modern discoveries. The most important one was that of Edwin Hubble, the Hubble telescope. You've heard of that. That's named after him. And he founded the first very large, I think, telescope. I think it was in the Los Angeles area, which several discoveries are attributed to him. The origin of the Big Bang Theory can be credited to Edwin Hubble. Hubble made the observation that the universe is continually expanding. He discovered that a galaxy's velocity is proportional to its distance. Galaxies that are twice as far from us move twice as fast. Another thing that he discovered is that the universe is expanding equally in every direction. This observation means that it has taken every galaxy the same amount of time to move from a common starting point to its current position. Hubble's observations provided for the foundation for the Big Bang Theory. The universe has been continuously expanding, and thus there has been more and more distance between clusters of galaxies. This phenomenon of galaxies farther away from each other is known as the redshift. As light from distant galaxies approaches the Earth, there is an increase of space between the Earth and the galaxy, and this leads to the wavelengths being stretched. So obviously everything in the universe is expanding outward from a central point. Then we can conclude A, the universe had a beginning. The universe had a beginning. It's a logical inference. The universe had a beginning. If it all came from a central point, there had to be a beginning. It is finite, not infinite. It is temporal, not eternal. We can dismiss the Greek pagan theories, and of course modern science until this came along, who believe that things have always been as they are now. That's not true. We know that that's not true. And then B, the universe seems to have originated from a central point, which I've mentioned. Hubble not only showed that the universe is expanding, but that it is expanding the same in all directions. To get a picture of this, imagine a balloon where you've painted little dots on it, a perfectly round balloon. As you blow up the balloon, the dots get farther and farther apart. Now, imagine that those dots are the galaxies in space as they're moving outward equally in all directions. Everything in the universe is expanding outward. The staggering implication of this is that at some point in the past, the entire known universe was contracted down to a single mathematical point, from which it has been expanding ever since. The farther back one goes in the past, the denser the universe becomes, so that one finally reaches a point of mind-boggling density, from which the universe began to expand. That's the first discovery, Hubble. The second discovery was that of a kind of universal background noise, or background radiation. In 1964, two astronomers, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, in an attempt to detect microwaves from outer space, inadvertently discovered a noise of extraterrestrial origin. The noise did not emanate from one position, but came from all directions at once. They postulated that what they heard from the farthest reaches of the universe was the effect of the Big Bang. Scientists regarded this as strong proof of some huge event at the beginning of our universe's existence. Now, the time of when this occurred is all over the place according to modern science, and of course I don't trust modern scientists when it comes to time anyway. I trust the Word of God. But some of the dates are 4 billion, 6 billion, 9 billion, 15 billion, 30.7 billion,